What is up, everybody? Welcome back to the video version of the Tone Mob podcast. Thank you so much for hanging out with me this week. I really appreciate you as always. This week, I'm talking to David Browne of Browne Amplification. You may have seen the Protein pedal floating around on the interwebs, either on the JHS show or maybe featured on Instagram at some point. It's been a really popular overdrive in the last few years, and I wanted to get David on to tell the story behind the company because it seemingly exploded out of nowhere, and I wanted to know what the deal was. We had a great conversation. I think you're really going to enjoy it. He has a very interesting story, and we get into a lot of businessy type things, not at a super granular level, but more of a high level, small business owner type of thing. You know, when to make that leap, what that looked like for him, et cetera, because I think that stuff is fascinating. I know a lot of people that listen to this show fall into that category, and I generally get a lot of really good feedback on that. So that's where we went for a lot of this episode. But we also talk about SMT and how that affects tone or maybe doesn't affect tone. We talk about germanium transistors. We talk about a lot of pedal nerdy stuff as well. So there's something for everybody on this episode. And I just wanted to remind everybody that this is the video version of the podcast. If you're like me and prefer audio podcasts, there are almost 340 episodes available wherever you get your podcasts, whether that's Spotify, Apple, etc. It is all there, and there are a ton of great interviews with everyone from Bryan Wampler to Frank Iero from My Chemical Romance, even Kyle Gass from Tenacious D. So slide over to your podcast player and check that out if audio is more your thing. But if not, here's the video for you. Let's get into it. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Tone Mob podcast, the show about guitar stuff, occasionally, sometimes. I'm your host, Blake Weiland, and with me today I have David Browne from Browne Amplification. And I noticed your last name has no E, but your company name has an E.
That is correct.
That. I don't know why that just dawned on me right this second, but it did. So I felt like I had to say it.
Well, you know what? I put that E on the end of there because I was trying to create some individuality to the brand way back years ago.
Mm-hmm. Way back years ago. So let's dive into it. Like, how did you get started? In my, view of it, Browne popped up pretty aggressively in the last, I want to say 3 to 4 years, but I'm sure that's not the full story. Yep. So when did you start? How did this all happen?
So I'm trying to remember which came first, but played music for years, been playing music my whole life, and had an amp repair that was exorbitantly expensive. So a friend of mine convinced me I should learn how to work on amps because until then I had only built cars. And
ooh, another car guy. This is going to be great.
Yeah, I'm a big motorhead. So I started redoing old blackface fenders. Got Gerald Weber's book and started learning how to solder and redoing old blackface fenders. And eventually, at some point, decided to build a guitar. I think that was when I broke my hand. I was wrestling with a friend's brother, and I fell on top of him and stuck my arm out to catch myself so I didn't smash him. And broke a bone in my hand, like the classic football break, whatever that bone is. I forget what it's called. Mm-hmm. And so I couldn't play guitar for months, which was really painful. Not the break, that was painful, but not being able to play music was really painful. And I was trying to figure out what to do with myself. And so I built a Stratocaster. And
like a parts caster, or were you carving it out and doing the whole thing?
I bought the neck, but I think for that one, I carved the body myself.
Cool.
So I grew up doing lots of woodworking, doing lots of mechanic stuff. My dad's a mechanical engineer, so I just kind of grew up with this idea that you can make or fix anything, just have to do it. Mm-hmm. So that got ingrained in me very young, which I'm really grateful to my dad for that. And so built a guitar. I think I did Fralin Vintage Hots, and it was... I played a bunch of guitars and measured the necks and kind of figured out exactly what I liked and kind of came up with this weird hybrid, felt more like a Gibson, but sounded more like a Strat. And I loved it, and everybody else that played it loved it. So I built a few more for different people, and just, kind of built 3 or 4 guitars a year for guys and 3 or 4 amps a year for guys. And it was just kind of a side hustle thing.
Mm-hmm.
And that was, 2000 ish.
Okay. Yeah.
So been doing that for a long time. The Protein, I'd been touring a ton as a guitar tech, and I loved it, but 4 teenagers at home, or 2 teenagers at home at that point, this was not working. So Adam convinced me to do a small run of the Protein pedal, because I had built one for him, and he loved it and said, man, if you made these, I think people would want them. And so I...
and just to take a step back, Adam is, for the listeners, who's Adam?
Adam Snigowski. He's longtime friend, client. I've built him lots of guitars and amplifiers, and he owns more Browne gear than anybody else, as far as I know.
Nice.
And good buddy of mine. And he had wanted me to build him this pedal. And so that was the Protein. And I spent a long time trying to get that right. And he and I went back and forth a lot of times on different revisions. And sorry, I'm going to try to figure out how to turn off my notifications, because
yes,
it is dinging in my ears.
The legendary
sorry about that
button. No worries.
Yes.
Yeah, people will see me occasionally looking down at the beginning of the episode, and that's because I'm checking my phone to make sure I turn that off. People are like, are you texting while the guest's on? I'm like, no, I'm just making sure that I'm not getting texts.
Yeah, I probably should do that too. There we go. There it is.
Sometimes I have it on to a detrimental degree, where it's like, I've been calling you all morning. Like, oh, sorry. Whoops. Forgot to turn it off.
Yep. You can get yourself in trouble that way.
Mm-hmm. Sorry, not sorry.
So, you're right. Well, depending on who's trying to get a hold of you. There are places where I lay my head at night where it'd be better if I wasn't in big trouble.
Hey, she knows right where I am. I'm just out in the shed, so she can find me.
There you go. So Adam, was a big fan of making more than one of these pedals. And so I, kind of put all the cash together I could scrape up and made 100 Protein pedals.
Mm-hmm.
And figured maybe I'd be able to sell enough of them to make my money back. And it's just kind of we've been playing catch up ever since.
Nice.
Can't seem to make enough of them fast enough. It's wonderful. I'm actually totally blown away.
And about what really time period was this?
3 years ago or so.
Okay. So I'm
terrible with times and dates. No, you're absolutely right.
And the Protein that's the one I've seen the most. You've obviously got a few more, but they seem to have their roots in that, if I'm not mistaken.
So the Protein was, an ODR1 type, it started its life there and got real heavily tweaked, and a blues breaker with added output section, somewhat modified together in one box. And then those 2 pedals, we have had enough people ask for them, the individual, you've got the green, the green side and the blue side. And so you've got the blue fans and the green fans, guys that love one and want more than one of one, or, just want that side. So we made the Carbon, which is the blue side. We had so much request for that as a standalone pedal. So the one that's more like a blues breaker ish, that's the Carbon. And then we're getting ready to release the Atom, which is the green side on its own. Mm-hmm. We also have a pedal that was based on all my years of trying to modify a Big Muff so that I could use it in a live band setting, and that's called the T4.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
And then we released the Fixer last year, which is I had guys asking me for years, what's your favorite buffer? And I said, well, it doesn't exist. So that's my favorite buffer, the fixer. And then it's got 2 independent boosts that you can switch between, and a tuner output and a mute. So it's just kind of meant to be a front of your pedal board problem solver.
Got it. Very cool. So you've released a lot into the wild, like very, very quickly, by some people's standards. There's some brands that'll ride one unit for a very long time, but you guys have just kind of taken the ball and ran with it. Is this something that just purely based on requests, or how do you decide what to develop when?
So the T4, which is the fuzz, was the second release. And, full disclosure, Josh Scott's a good friend of mine. I've known him for a long time. I've worked on all of his amplifiers, and, well, probably not all of his amplifiers. I went through his entire collection of Fender amplifiers. And then for years, I'd been working on his Softex, changing all the pots and making those MiG 50s awesome. He has a bunch of random Softex so I spent a year about going through Josh's amps over at JHS, which was a blast.
Nice.
And so Josh and I are good friends, and he heard me playing the T4 at a gig and came up to me and said, "What the heck was that?" And I said, "Oh, it's this." And he said, "You should release that next." And so he was super excited when it came out. We made 100 of those, and he debuted it on the JHS show and sold out in minutes. It was insane.
That sounds like Josh. That sounds like the Josh
yeah.
I know. Yeah.
Yeah. He's amazing. I love him. And we've got 3 or 4 more in the queue, and I'm spending a lot of time these days designing pedals because that's what I really love doing. So I feel really lucky to get to do that. Mm-hmm. Started a business, and then was the chief fireman for a long time, and then tried to figure out how to get myself out of that role so I could go back to designing pedals.
That's one of the tricky things about being in business, right? Especially
yes.
in any kind of manufacturing capacity, is it's real easy to start wearing all of the hats. And then when you start wearing all of the hats, it's very difficult to take them off and sometimes relinquish that control to somebody who, maybe is better at it, or maybe just needs to get off your plate. How do you figure out how to juggle some of that stuff so you can get back to the root of it, what it is you like to do?
Well, I feel really lucky in that being friends with Josh, I was able to garner a lot of wisdom from him, and just kind of watch how things ran and figure out ways that I would or wouldn't want to do things based on the way the JHS was running, and based on what I wanted to run, And I have a couple of really good friends who are really smart guys that kind of sit on my board. Well, they don't, they are my board. And, at some point they started saying, "Dave, you gotta hire somebody to do all this stuff that you're really bad at, like run a business." And very good friend of mine, Ben Woodward, guy who I trust very deeply, became available, and I hired him.
Nice.
And he kind of runs the ship, as it were.
So, like from an operations standpoint or a marketing standpoint, or yes, all of it?
He's wearing a lot of hats right now. He's kind of GM, kind of running things. I'm kind of trying to design things and keep production flowing. We've got another guy we hired this year, Braxton, who's doing all our repairs and helping me design stuff, and does a lot of testing, because we test a lot of, we test everything before we ship it out. Everything gets double tested. So that's a big job as well. But it's the 3 of us doing everything.
Mm-hmm. That's one of the things I like talking to people who make stuff, obviously, and especially when people make stuff in a production capacity, because I don't know if you're aware, but the audience is very aware. I'm a partner in Stringjoy, and while I don't handle the day-to-day operations there, that's all on Scott. I think a lot of people, they don't, even us, almost nobody, when they start out, like realizing how difficult, it's really easy to make one thing,
right,
but trying to make lots of that one thing and have it be as good as the time that you could only focus on the one thing is really, really difficult. And you have to implement systems and different things. So like, how was it for you guys moving from, okay, I'm kind of doing these one-off projects to now making 100, and now you're making even more than that with multiple models. How was that process for you guys?
So I built a lot of through-hole hand-built pedals in my life, and I enjoy doing that occasionally. It's great if you're wanting to change parts out, test stuff, right? Like it's a fairly friendly platform for reworking and modifying parts. But to put something into production that way, the amount of labor and man hours required, I quickly realized I do not want to build 100 of anything this way. And so, based on long hours of conversation with Josh and several other industry guys, I decided to go SMD and see what the result was. And so I had some SMD boards made for the Protein with the same design as what I had built the prototypes through hole. And I liked them just as well as the through hole Proteins. Mm-hmm. And in fact, they were far more consistent. So whereas, with the through hole, you'd build 5 and one of them would be really exceptional. And then 3 would be good and one would be weird. And you'd have to try and figure out where the inconsistency was. The SMD, once in a while, I'll have a bad board. But most of the time, they all sound almost identical and they all sound fantastic. So if the layout's good and the part selection is good, it makes production much more manageable. So then you just, your through hole components are your pots and your switches. And now we're doing relays. So for soft switching. So there's not even, the T4 is still hard switching, but everything else is relays. Mm-hmm. So that was a game changer production wise.
Yeah, that makes a big difference. So, and I've had a little bit of experience on both sides, not necessarily with like pick and place machines and things like that, but as far as through hole versus SMD, last year I did the pizza pedal with big ear pedals, and the original prototypes, it's called the slice of pie. It was in the shape of a piece of pizza. People probably saw it.
Amazing.
We did the prototypes, and we had a lot of people put their ears on it, and by the time it ended up to me, it already been through several filters, and I was just swapping out a couple parts and making the fine tune. Like, they all sounded good at this point. Which kind of good do you want it to go right with, basically? And then they sent me the final version that was the one I own now, and it was an SMD revision of the original through hole design. I'm like, this is not only quieter, but it's better. Like, it's tighter. Everything was just better about it. And a lot of people don't like, in this space, don't like to hear that. They're like, it's garbage. It's garbage. And that's just not true. It's not true at all.
Well, yeah, we believed this for a long time, that like a big film capacitor is going to sound better than a small one. And that for some reason I believed it. Josh is the one that convinced me to even try this. He said, they're more consistent. It's not worse. You're not going to not like it because it's SMD. You might not like the parts that you chose or the values that you chose, but
right.
I agree. People don't like it and they don't really want to hear it. But my personal experience is 100% what you just said.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, and if you got to think about it, there's a reason that iPhones aren't through hole, and it isn't just for the. It isn't just because that it would be too.
You haven't seen my through hole iPhone?
It's the technology's gotten better and better, and it just keeps improving over time. It's kind of hilarious that we as guitar player, and I love vintage stuff. I love the quote unquote mojo. Like, I like all that. I think it's fun and I think it's interesting. But I also know some of that is just me being nostalgic and weird about it. It's not rooted in any actual science. It's just cool because it is cool. Like,
right.
Like that 55 Junior back there, not the epitome of guitar technology, but I sure like it. It sure is cool.
Yeah. Vibey as heck.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
and that's where we get weird as guitar players, where we're like, we agonize sometimes over one transistor in a vintage fuzz face. Meanwhile, there's like how many billion transistors in the Apple M1 chip? I don't even remember. Some ridiculous number, all in that one chip. So it's wild what the things that we will argue about on the internet. I've actually stepped into forums before, and I've said, on the gear page and a few other places. I don't really go on the gear page anymore, but in a few other places, I've just been like, you realize we're all like grown adults arguing about toys, right? Like that's what's going on right now.
Don't tell them that. No, they don't want to hear that. Nobody wants to hear that. Now, I'm going to say, I do love germanium transistors.
Of course, they're great, and there's a.
I have boxes.
Germanium.
Yeah. I have boxes and boxes, and I have plans because there are things that nothing else, to me, to my ear, nothing else captures that. So I love germanium fuzzes. Now, do I want to use one on a cold or a hot day, or you know what I mean? Am I going to want to rely on that for a tool that I need in a certain live setting? Maybe not. But boy, they sure are fun toys, as you said.
Studio setting, why not? Right. Let it rip. Yeah.
Really cool inductors and wah pedals. Like it's really hard to fake that stuff.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, even I've said this on a bunch of episodes lately, but 2014 is when I built the shred shed out here, and I spent a ton of time and a ton of money, trying to make it as sound isolated as possible, because I was like, I have to be able to crank tube amps. I have to. That's the only way I can live my life is if I can crank tube amps. And if I had waited to do that just a few years, if I'd waited till 2016, 2017, modeling came around so much in that very short time frame. And now it's just absolutely insane what you can do with a plugin, that I may not have built this and spent all the time and money. That said, I will go back and forth between the plugins I use and my nice tube amps. I do it all the time. And every time I plug in a stereo rig into like two, half stacks and just let it rip, I'm like, you know what? I made the right choice.
I am glad to be alive in this moment.
So there is, as for all the practical reasons that we might say components don't matter that much, it's more about design and selection. There is something to the old way, quote unquote, of doing things. There's a reason that we all got so excited about this stuff in the first place. So hope the listeners don't hear me belly aching about this and think that I'm like poo-pooing all of the cool old stuff. I'm not. I'm just saying that sometimes we put an emphasis, we overemphasize things that don't necessarily make as much of a difference as we think they do.
Yes. I mean, when I build amps, I'm not building them with PCBs, although there is parts of it that I would be willing to use PCBs for, but I'm never going to attach a tube socket to a PCB.
Right. Sure.
And, I've got a Walrus ACS1 here that, like, this thing running in stereo is magical with the right IRs and whatever. Is it as good as some of my old amps with a really good microphone into a really good tree, into a really good tube compressor through a really good converter? Probably, arguably not. But that's not what the setup that I have at, the Dirty Club on Friday night or church on Sunday morning. I don't have half that gear, right? So then the modeling pedal ends up winning.
Yeah. What's his new? I can think of. This is terrible of me. Howard, who used to work at Catlin Bread years ago, and he has a new company. My brain is not working. I can picture his pedal. It's called the Groovy Wizard. Oh, he's probably going to be mad at me if he ever hears this. But Kitty Caster Effects. That's what his new company is called. He posted this is not exactly like modeling versus not modeling, but he posted a clip on Instagram, and there's some things there. It's like probably an MP3 and it's going through the internet. So it's not going to be the most accurate thing in the world, but it's pretty decent. He did a cranked Marshall with a mic'd cab versus that same Marshall into the UA aux with the same mic selection, on the same cab in the software, and had people try to guess which clip was which. And I got it right, but it was backwards from what a lot of the people were saying. I I had a 50. I'm not saying I have these magic ears. I got lucky. But I was listening for which one I thought sounded tighter and a little bit more refined, and that was the UA. Because in my experience, like a really well done IR by a company like Universal Audio, who's put thousands of dollars and thousands of hours into that research, it's gonna be like slightly more refined sounding oftentimes with those cab sims than an actual mic'd up, unless you're talking about, you've ran it through a bunch of compressors and you've really spent the time on that 30-second Instagram clip. Oftentimes the IRs kind of win in those, which it pains me to say, but on a recording, it's just kind of the reality that I've experienced anyway.
I think something that's exciting for me about all that is I remember being young and playing a Squier Strat and dreaming of the day that I could, own a cool vintage amp and the accessibility of great sounds. I mean, if you have a laptop and a couple of good pedals and an amp sim, I mean, what you can create these days is amazing. And that makes me really happy.
Yep. Yeah, I didn't plan on doing this, but Christmas Eve, I pulled out my old Les Paul, the first electric guitar I ever owned. I plugged into a Mr. Black Tape X2, plugged stereo into the
Love that pedal.
Oh, it's absolutely one of my very favorite things. I have a little bit of a personal attachment to that one because it was one of the first pedals that I was asked to put my ears on before release day. But I absolutely love the Tape X2. I plugged it into the Benson Chimera plugin. In about 10-15 minutes, I had recorded a cover of Silent Night, and that night I uploaded it to DistroKid. I was just like, you know what, this sounds really good. I mixed it a little bit, I added a little bit here and there, but largely, and I had some synth pads in the background that I added, but largely it's just me finger picking a Les Paul and into this cab sim. And I'm like, everybody I've sent it to says, like, this sounds really good. What did you use? I'm like, this is all it is. There's nothing. I feel like I'm cheating because it was so easy to do. I
feel dirty.
Yeah, yes. I'm not clean. But that said, like I said, there's still nothing like opening it up and just absolutely letting it rip. It's the feeling that we all crave, right?
Yeah. I mean, I love gear. I did a twin reverb years ago, had Weber recone the orange JBLs. So it's a silver face twin reverb with JBLs in it that I, went through and just dialed it. And it's one of the best amps I've ever heard in my life. And I mean, you turn that thing on 8 and stand in front of it. And, a twin reverb can take your face off, but that particular twin reverb with those JBLs, it was just glorious. Stratocaster into that, you were just at Little Wing, Yeah,
you gotta love it. What are some of your early gear memories? Like you talked about, like having a Squier and dreaming of better tone, but when did you actually plug into something that made you go, whoa?
Yeah, so my journey with gear was, I had a really bad particle board Les Paul. That was my first electric guitar that I played on for years. Learned, I think, every Led Zeppelin song there was on that guitar. Nice. And that Squier was a big upgrade for me. I think I was playing through a crate half stack at that point.
Yeah.
Eventually I traded that crate half stack and that little half rack processor for a twin reverb. Not a glorious twin reverb like the one I just described, but a silver face that would take your head off. You could knock down planes with that twin reverb, but it was amazing. It was so much better than the crate. So my journey with gear was, just gradually trying to be able to afford stuff. I eventually bought a reissue Tweed Bassman, and I loved that amp. That's the one that broke, that cost me almost as much as I paid for it to get it fixed, which started me on my journey of fix your own gear.
Mm-hmm. You never know what's going to do it, right?
Yeah. And then, I honestly built that Strat, and that was probably the first guitar I ever owned that blew my mind.
That had to have been an interesting feeling. That, like, hey, I made this from a block of wood and some parts, and it now feels like one of those instruments that there's some instruments you pick up and you're like, yeah, it's cool. Some you pick up and you're like, I must have this. That had to have been kind of trippy having that come from your own process.
Well, and it was weird because I'd gone through this, 4-month period, I think, of being in a cast and not being able to play guitar, and then kind of coming out of this to being able to start learning how to play again. And this was the guitar that I had to play. And so there had to have been some of that in there, as well as, I can finally play guitar again. And this guitar sounds like the best guitar I've ever played.
Knock on wood, I've never had to be out of commission with playing in that capacity for that long. Was it weird? Did it feel like unnatural, or was it like riding a bike when you finally did get to come back to it?
So, maybe 2 months in, they told me I could start playing slide. So I had been playing some, but it was not like riding a bike. It was not natural. I'd lost a lot of muscle and a lot of dexterity. I'm not sure that I ever got the dexterity fully back, because I played a lot before that. I mean, there was quite a few years where I played, almost all day, every day. And so to go from that to, being a married adult with a child trying to play was a whole different game.
Yeah, for sure. And that's
I wouldn't recommend breaking your hand.
It doesn't sound like it. It doesn't sound like a good time at all. So when you transitioned to having your own company, and you were getting out of the touring lifestyle and everything, what was your family's reaction to this? Was it like, hey, I'm starting this small business? Because I know it can be a bit scary to strike out on your own. How did that go for you?
I think we were all on board with, we've got to figure something out, and I'm going to try this. And it became apparent fairly quickly that it was going to work. And I feel really lucky for that. Mm-hmm. I mean, Browne Amplification has been around. I mean, that first guitar had Browne on the headstock. So it's been around since 2000, but that was our first, like, we're going to attempt to make something that we can scale.
Right.
And the guys that I talk about that are on my board, they were guys who taught me words like scale. So,
and not scale length.
One of them,
yeah,
right. One of them had been running a business here in Kansas City, and really quickly realized that all of the business was dependent on him and his ability to produce. And so there was some really great lessons that I got to learn vicariously through some really smart people of ways to do things. So I feel really lucky, and I feel well guided, and yeah,
it's really good to have the access to that stuff. And that's one of the things that I've told a lot of people when they've asked me about wanting to quit their job, or like, I want to start this guitar shop or repair shop or whatever, YouTube channel, whatever the case may be. And I did both for, actually, I basically tell everybody I worked 3 full-time jobs for like 3-4 years, and I probably should have done it a little bit longer. I couldn't mentally handle it any longer than that, but
right.
But I did. I was working my full-time day job in the oil industry. I was doing like like marketing consulting, and I was trying to get the podcast off the ground all at the same time. And eventually I was able to leave, but it's one of those things where I've told people, don't be afraid to do multiple things if you have the capacity
Right.
to do it, because you're gonna screw up, and you're gonna screw up forever. You're not, like that's never really going to be something that you totally get away from. But in the beginning,
Right.
that's why they say most small businesses don't last very long, because a lot of people will dive in with both feet and not have any cushion to make those mistakes. So I always
Yeah.
try to encourage people to, give yourself some runway, because you're going to make mistakes that are going to cost you money, and it's best if you can still eat through that. So
Right.
yeah, but
And, you
you
having
had
the
this
family
guidance
compounds that.
yeah, the family compound. But it's nice that you had this guidance out the gate to help kind of smooth that out a little bit. I think that's pretty unusual.
Yeah, I mean, I had the repair business going, and I had a lot of work when I decided to step back from the gig that I had. And I had a really awesome gig, and I loved it. And I knew I could go back to that if we decided that. I knew that going and getting a guitar tech job would not be hard. It wouldn't be hard right now. Because I didn't mean that to come off as arrogant, but I worked for great people and had lots of really positive relationships and guys that would speak for me. That's all I'm saying by that.
I get
But had a lot of work lined out, because Josh was like, "Hey, will you go through all these old amps?" And I'm looking at this stack of amps, going, "This is going to take months." And so I had that lined up, and my wife has always worked. And so it definitely wasn't like quitting your day job to go try something else. It was a huge risk and a huge investment. But like you said, I was wearing a lot of different hats, as well as stay-at-home dad.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I really think that that's a beneficial way to do it. I really think that there's kind of a, entrepreneurship has been somewhat glorified in the last 15 years or so. And I really like it. I'm the type of person who will definitely work 120 hours so I don't have to work 40 for somebody else. That's just my mindset. And I've said this before on the show. My dad's not that way. Like he did work for himself for a lot of years, and he realized it's not for him. He's happier being able to punch a clock, punch out, and not think about it anymore. And as an entrepreneur, you don't necessarily have that luxury. It's pretty much always in your brain somewhere swimming around. You can't leave it at work fully, especially when work is something that you're passionate about, which is music. That makes it all pretty much unavoidable. So you have to be okay with that if you are going to dive into it. And I do think there's been some romanticism. Everyone thinks they're going to be Mark Zuckerberg or something. And back in the day, people didn't like to say that they were entrepreneurs, and now everybody has that in their Instagram bio.
Yeah. I think the water gets real murky real fast, like you said, when it's music, and it's something that it's a great way to take something that you really love and mess it up real good.
Yes.
I love guitar pedals, and I hate them equally currently. I feel really lucky and I'm so grateful, but I don't ever go home from work, and that's hard. I'm not complaining, but it's real.
It's something to consider if you're listening to this right now and you're thinking how great it would be if I could start the next Browne Amplification. Do some soul searching before you go into it, because maybe it's not for you, and that's fine. Don't feel bad about it because you determined that that's not for you. I think knowing yourself is like the first step in getting fulfillment out of your career. I think a lot of people, like myself included, I worked really hard to get into the position I was in at that former job. And I got there and was like, well, this sucks. But it was my own fault. I worked really, really hard to get there and put all my eggs into that basket. And I finally got there and realized, oh, I didn't really like this. If I had been a little more self-aware, I maybe could have gotten to doing what I'm doing a lot sooner, but I'm not regretting anything. It all works out the way it's supposed to work out. Mostly just trying to save a listener from beating themselves up too much.
Yeah. Yeah, we get emails once in a while like, I would like to start a pedal company. And, in no way trying to protect myself or the pedal industry by saying, are you sure?
Right. Well, and a lot of people, now this is something that I've got a lot of friends in the industry just like you do. And I'm sure that this is not new information to yourself, but a lot of people come to work at, or they start to work at Stringjoy in particular, and they're like, cool, I'm going to be playing guitar all day for some reason. It's like, no, you're not ever going to play guitar here. You're going to be making strings. You're going to be packing stuff. That's the reality. You're going to be, in your case, you're going to be soldering. You're very rarely going to be playing guitar, maybe when you're testing stuff. But even then, you're not going to be just like ripping through a full stack for a good time. You're testing stuff to make sure it works.
Right.
It's amazing how little guitar can be played when you own a guitar related company, at least during work hours.
And how it will affect your desire to play the guitar and your relationship with the guitar and music and, everything that you were talking about a few minutes ago. I finished this office 2 years and a half ago because I realized I have to create a space that's separate from where I work on things. Now, I still do a lot of testing in here, but I had to create a space that was separate from where I actually solder things to play music, because otherwise, just any desire to do that was interrupted by the amount of tasks and things that I saw in front of me. I couldn't focus on, I'm going to go play music, because it's like, well, I need to finish that, and I've got that, and I need to do that. And you know what I mean? My ADD couldn't take it.
Yeah, I have a little bit of that problem myself. This is my fun space, and it's also my workspace, and the two swirl together quite often, which is both good and bad. Because I'll be like, I'm supposed to be demoing this. Instead, I went off and wrote something instead, which is not really pertinent to literally, I'll be getting set up to do a demo of a pedal. And I'll be like, and this is great, but it's also not productive. I'll be real inspired, and I'll just well, I want to record this real quick. And then I'm like, you didn't set up your cameras. You didn't do any of the other stuff you were supposed to do in the meantime. And now you've got a cool track that you can't really do anything with. But setting up the time, and maybe you already do this, but I've said this to others that work in this industry. What really saved it for me was having a project that I had to work on because I publicly said I was going to work on it. Brought me kind of back from the sort of mundane, here's what this pedal sounds like, do, to where in 2021, I was just like, I'm going to release an album. I said it on the podcast. I was like, I'm releasing a record this year, and I don't care what I use on it. I don't care what gear I select. I'm just going to pick things that are inspiring me in that moment. And I'm going to make music just to make music, not to show off what the piece of gear can do. And that really did a lot for me. I was really happy with how the record turned out, and the reception was incredibly nice, which was kind of shocking because it's pretty weird. But having that project really reinvigorated the love of making music to make music and not to show off the gear.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I've done some stuff in the studio with Adam recently, and it's still been gear related, but it's been very different from normal day to day, where I'm in a recording studio with a guitar, which is not my normal day to day life. Right. And we're trying to make something beautiful, and it's incredible how much life that gives to me.
Yep.
So that's great advice.
It takes you back to the reason you got into this in the first place. And I think that's something that we all need,
Yeah.
It's
I was thinking when you were talking about kind of getting lost in you're demoing a piece of gear and you kind of get lost and go off on a tangent and find yourself being really inspired. To me, that's a marker for something is nearly done or nearly completed, or I've created something that's really great. When I go to play a guitar that whether I'm working on it for somebody else or whether it's something that I've built or it's something I'm modifying, when I plug into a piece of gear and I start playing it and I get lost in it and inspired by it, I'm like, you just did something there. You just made something cool.
Right.
That's why I do this.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. I love that. And seeing that happen with other people is the coolest thing. You know, you take something that you had a hand in or that you made and you put it in front of somebody and watch them have that experience, you know, whether it's at an amp show or, you know, whatever. It's the coolest thing. You know, I've gotten I've gotten the really fortunate opportunity to, you know, take gear to people that I really admire and watch their eyes light up. I'm like, oh, but I love your music and you love this thing that I had some small hand in. And this is what come full circle. Do you have
what a
moments
gift
like that?
I just had one the other night where I got a text from somebody and guitar player that I love who had just showed the Protein to another guitar player that I love. And he was like, oh my gosh, he was blown away by this pedal. And he's connecting the two of us. And I'm texting with, you know, an artist that I just, should I say, I don't know if I should say names. Is this weird? Is it weirder if I don't? Okay.
No, drop that name.
Well, no. Okay, so Mason Stoops is texting me the other night and saying, I'm helping Theo Katzman put a pedal board together, and he just played the Protein, and his mind was, you know, he loved it and put us in touch. And so I've been texting with Theo, and I love Theo Katzman. I love his music, and he's such an amazing artist. He just dropped a new single this morning. Somebody sent it to me, and I listened to it first thing this morning and was like, wow, that is incredibly beautiful. And so it's just like, you know, I'm just like a little kid all night. I'm just giddy because I'm texting Theo Katzman and I love his music.
No, I totally get it. And that's the thing about this industry that is really kind of unlike any other, in my opinion. I'm sure there are similarities in other things somewhere that I'm just not aware of. But, you know, Scott and I, Scott at Stringjoy, I know I'm just saying that nonstop, but we talk about this a lot, where I think he's a really brilliant dude. And I've said this before. If he had started a toilet paper company, I'd probably want to get involved because he's just a really smart dude. And, you know, all that to say is, like, the music gear industry, I think sometimes the consumers of it may have a different perception of it than what it actually is. There are very few people just Scrooge McDucking through gold doubloons in this industry. It's just not really a thing that happens very often. Sure, there you can do really well and you can be comfortable, but you're not going to be Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos. It's just not going to happen.
No.
But the experiences you get when you get to have things like that happen, when Theo's texting you, and where you get to go to shows and meet up with people that you really admire, and that is worth more than money. I mean, you got to have enough money to eat, but at the end of the day, those experiences are what make this industry really, really special and worth putting all the time and effort into. And I've had enough pinch me moments at this point that I never thought was going to happen, that I'm pretty confident they're going to continue to happen more and more over time, because it's like, I can't believe I'm talking to this person. Can't believe I'm talking to this person. Can't believe. So that's what's magical about this business, I think.
I totally agree. I got to go see Mason play with Marcus Mumford on the Marcus touring his newest record. And I mean, that guy playing a fretless baritone, you know, sustainer guitar, it's just mind blowing. Like, I have never seen a guitar do that before. Thank you.
Yep. And you get to know the person. And Mason's a great dude. I've talked to him a handful of times, and
so kind.
It's what the people in this business, I think, are what make it special. And with pedal companies and just gear companies in general, I think the reason for that is there's just like very few people there. I mean, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. There are a few people that I don't really want to talk to in this industry. There are a few, but they're very rare. most of it's like, man, that guy's so cool. That girl's so cool. Oh, that person's amazing. And I think it's something about the process of creating these devices and these things that attracts a certain type of person, because it's very rare for a whole industry just to be riddled with awesome people the way this one is.
Yeah, but that's been my experience as well, and that's very interesting observation. And it's, I mean, for everybody that I've met, I would agree with you. I haven't actually met anybody who I didn't want to have a conversation with.
I haven't physically
met you can tell me who they are later.
I haven't physically met anyone, but that's because I was already aware that I was going to just go ahead.
I've gotten emails from them.
Well, sure.
Sorry.
No, it's all good. It's all good. Well, we are approaching the end of the episode. This has been a really great chat. I really, really enjoyed it. Thank you very much for taking the time to come on and hang out with me. It's really enjoyable.
Thank you. It's been a blast.
But before we get into what I like to call the classic questions that I wrap these episodes up on, I like to give the guests a chance to take the floor and, shout out your grandma or say anything you want to say. You got the ear of a few thousand people right now, and you can plug anything you want to plug. You can thank anybody you want to thank. You can say anything you want to say right now.
Man, I'm just so grateful. I'm so grateful for all the support that Browne has had, and all of, everybody that's played our stuff. And we've got all these amazing people who take our pedals and show them to other people. And it's just such a gift. I feel like it's a great time to be playing music and be alive. And I'm just incredibly humbled and grateful by everybody that's, played one of our products or bought one of our products or helped us out in any way. So thank you.
There you go. And hey, by listening to this podcast, go check it out. Go to Browne, check it out. It's good stuff, good people. Definitely slide over to their socials and give them all the likes and do all that stuff. It's incredibly helpful, more than you might think it is.
Yes.
All right. Classic questions. The first one, I'll be actually really curious to get your answer to this one, because some people, a lot of musicians have the same answer, but pedal builders not necessarily. What is your favorite Boss pedal?
There's a lot of them. Probably the OD1.
Ooh, the OD1. That one's come up a few times lately. What do you like about it?
It's just an amazing drive pedal.
Do you like it into clean amps, dirty amps?
I would probably pick something that was starting to break. If I want drive, typically I like a drive pedal going into an amp that's starting to break.
Just barely.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. The OD1 for me, I've got one. I've got an original MIJ one here somewhere. And I couldn't quite get along with it into clean amps. But
yeah,
super high gain amps that needed just a little bit more for some reason, that's where I really like the OD1. Is kind of like how some people would use a tube screamer, tightening up a 5150 style like super metal thing. That's where I think the OD1 shines, but gives it a little bit of a different flavor than trying to do the same thing with the tube screamer. So yeah, OD1, nice choice. Nice choice.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. All right, then this is the final question, and this is the one that causes families to break up and the earth to shatter and the trolls to come out of the cave with their pitchforks and torches. But it has to be asked: what is your favorite kind of pizza?
Pineapple and ham.
Oh, geez. Well, I'm gonna have to scrap this whole episode. I'll just have to. I'm just gonna leave. This is terrible. Is it really? Is it, you really like the Hawaiian pizza?
I love pineapple. Yeah, I do. I really love Hawaiian pizza.
That's fair. You got a favorite spot?
I mean, deep dish pepperoni. Here's the thing. I haven't eaten gluten for like 15 years. I realized I was really seriously allergic to it, and my health improved a whole lot when I stopped eating it. So me and pizza don't have a deep love affair like we used to. But I mean, a Chicago deep dish pepperoni, is a thing of great beauty.
Yeah. I As you probably can imagine, I'm a massive pizza fan. This is not the first time it's came back up on this episode. And the pineapple pizza thing I have a bit of a weird relationship with it, because I started asking that question about, I'm going to say 9 months to a year before it became like an internet battleground. I started asking that, what's your favorite kind of pizza on the end of every episode since like episode, I don't know, somewhere in the teens, I think. And the pineapple I didn't know that like it was a super common thing that people do. I just don't like pineapple, which is, that's my weird thing. I don't like it on anything. I don't want to eat it.
Wow.
Period. Yeah. It's not my thing for some reason. I don't know. I keep trying.
So are you a teriyaki guy?
Not really. No.
Okay.
I'll eat it.
Any sweet and savory thing that you are like, I enjoy that?
Maple bacon. I like that.
Yes.
There's more. I like sweet and salty, like popcorn and stuff like that. There's plenty of sweet and savory things I like. I don't like the flavor of pineapple. It's not just sweet. It's got a weird tang to it that I just don't.
It's almost fruity.
Yeah, it's like it's a fruit or something. You know what I mean? What's going on here? I can't say I don't
love
fruit.
Pineapple.
I can't say I don't like fruit on pizza, because tomato is technically fruit. So
I mean, they're a beautiful fruit.
I like peppers. Like, I like hot peppers, obviously, but like I also like a little bell pepper on my pizza, and that's kind of sweet. So it's something that I can't explain. There is one application where I do like pineapple, but I don't want the chunks of pineapple in there the way some places serve it. I really love al pastor, which is traditionally cooked with pineapple. I love it. It's one of my favorite Mexican meats is al pastor, but some places will actually have
one of the best.
The chunks of pineapple in it, and I don't like that. But I appreciate that it needs cooked with the pineapple in order to be.
I can take chunks or not chunks. I love al pastor.
It's such a good meat. I
love
underrated.
Tacos. It is underrated. We make carnitas at my house on the regular. I'll cook a whole pork butt, and we will eat carnitas for days.
You smoke them? How do you cook it?
Sometimes.
Yeah.
I'll either smoke it, or I'll cook it in the pressure cooker, or I'll cook it in the oven. It's, kind of whatever. Just got to cook for a real long time till it shreds real easy and needs lots of cumin and lime and onions and all the goodness.
Tell me about your smoker setup. Let's talk about that real quick before we got to go.
Okay, so I had a Traeger, but I got rid of it this last year, and I got a Masterbuilt gravity feed charcoal, and I made the best brisket I've ever had in my life on that this year. So I injected it, and there's a really great barbecue place here in town called Q39, and
I've had it.
Okay. So their burnt ends are to die for, and so was discussing. The founder of it passed last year, and was talking to a buddy of his. Yeah, it was really sad. I was talking to a buddy of his, and he was talking about their years of barbecue competitions, and Cosmos injections and all these lovely things. And so I kind of went down the rabbit hole with him and did exactly what he said, and made a mind-blowing brisket. But the charcoal is a game changer. I got away from charcoal because it takes too long, and grilling. I grill a lot in the summer, and kids and all of that. But man, that gravity feed with the fan and everything, it gets to temperature really fast. Like 15 minutes, it'll get to 600 degrees. So
really,
it's my all-in-one grill now.
You got me curious. I've got a Traeger that I've used it for, probably almost 10 years at this point.
Yep.
And it's getting towards the end of its lifespan. We literally cook on it 3-4 times a week, and have since we've got it.
So you grill as well as smoke?
Yep. I do both. Yep.
Yeah.
And so my wife it's funny to hear her say this. She's like, the Traeger goes out. I mean, that's like, at our house, that's like the refrigerator going out. Like, oh no, we got to replace this immediately. It's a problem. We don't have the Traeger. It's getting to the end of its lifespan, so I've been exploring other options. I may go back with Traeger, because this one has definitely served me well. But there's Green Mountain out there. There's The Rec Tech really has my eye right now, especially being all stainless. But I have thought about trying the charcoal. I'm a little bit scared of going away from what I know, like any good guitar player.
Yeah. You know, the Traeger that I had, to be fair, the guy that sold it to me at Costco, so it was a Silverton, it was a Costco model, I was told would do grilling and smoking equally well. And that was not my experience. I did not appreciate burgers on it. Now, I've been at friends' house and they've grilled on their, other model Traegers, and I've made great burgers, great chicken. But for me, it was not, I preferred my gas grill for grilling.
Was it
So
not consistent enough, or what was it doing?
It wouldn't get hot enough.
Oh, okay, interesting.
Which is odd,
It is weird.
I mean, it's not something I wanted to cook steak on.
Yeah.
But this Masterbuilt, it'll go 750 degrees. It'll sear anything. Yeah. So it's kind of I got rid of my gas grill and my Traeger. Sold my year-old Traeger, and the Masterbuilt was significantly cheaper than even buying a new gas grill. So
that's the thing is, there you go. They're not that expensive. Now you got me thinking, where am I going to go? Unless Traeger wants to sponsor this podcast, that would be interesting if somebody from Traeger heard this, right?
I mean, if they don't, they're making a mistake. Smoked meats are the lifeblood of. I mean, I have. Yeah. I think I have some barbecue sauce in my.
I know that I do. I know I do. I know we're getting to the end here, but I do want to shout out Dustin. He picked me up to take me to the airport after I did the JHS show last was it 2021, I believe, and he brought me Q39 barbecue as well as took me to the airport. So shout out Dustin, you are the man.
Wow.
Thank you for that. Yeah. That was some good barbecue.
Yeah. Arguably the best in Kansas City, in my opinion.
I had two places. What's the classic place there? My brain's failing. The most famous place.
There's a lot.
What's the most famous place?
Well, you got Gates. You've got
wasn't Gates.
Oklahoma Jones, which became KC Joe's.
That's it. KC Joe's.
Arthur. Arthur Bryant's is like the classic, legit, old school.
Okay. KC Joe's I had, and I loved it. I did, but Q39 was better, I think. I don't know if that's contentious or not, but I really love it.
You have frozen completely.
Oh, did I freeze?
Oh, there you're back.
Oh,
you did.
Well, the listeners will have heard what I said, but since you didn't, I said I did like KC Joe's quite a bit, but Q39 was better. It just was. I
mean, I like all of them. I'll go eat barbecue at almost any place in Kansas City, and I love them. But Q39 is, that's special. Next level.
Well, if you ever find yourself in Portland, you may be surprised, but we do have a few legit spots that I can take you to of various styles. I think you'll be very satisfied. So come on over.
I love it, and I love Portland, so I'm on my way.
Next time you're here, hit me up. We'll eat.
Right on. I do like to eat.
It's my favorite pastime. Well, thank you so much for coming on. I think we'll go ahead and wrap this up, and we'll slide over to Patreon and get a little bit weird with it. What do you say?
Love it.
All right, sounds good. All right, everybody. For David, this is Blake, and as always, folks, good luck and good tones. Alrighty, folks, there you have it. I hope you enjoyed this episode. I just want to remind everyone real quick to check out Browne Amplification. They make some really cool stuff, and as you just heard, David is a very cool guy. And if you want more of this conversation, if you want more audio content delivered to your ears every week, you can go to patreon.com/tonemob, where for $5 a month, you'll not only get the ad-free feed of the main episodes, you'll also get extra bonus episodes beamed right to your ears every single week, including this one with David. We get into some pretty weird territory, including how us dads are currently feeling about sending our kids to college, considering, student loans and stuff. So if you want to hear more random jibber jabber that you might get some value out of, there is a good way to do it right there on Patreon, and you'll help support this show, keep the lights literally on, and I really, 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 really appreciate that very much. All right, folks, I'll talk to you next time. Later.